this. This is the best play I have seen.
Oh, hold on a second. Kobbe finding the dog all isolated. That's a lot of damage. Oh, he wins the 1v2. But this is going to be all she wrote. Just shy of an hour. Splyce are going to finish the game against Misfits. The hopes and dreams getting crushed here of H2k. They're getting chucked out to boot. That's a lot of damage. And for good measure, the Cosmic Radiance comes in. Caedrel swoops on by, but that's going to be the double kill over to Perkz to come back 2-0 on the week.
And for the first time in history, the 4th consecutive EU LCS title, G2 Esports.
Misfits, the underdogs in this game. No one expected anything, but they hit hard.
Jankos, the first Blood King!
Welcome to Berlin in week 4 of the Spring Split. It's been a close race so far, and with 5 teams tied at 3-3, the stage is set for some crucial matchups in the next 2 days. I'm Daniel Drakos, here with Martin Deficio to start off the week.
It's very confusing that Xerxe sounds so different today. Also, you seem to have a beard all of a sudden.
You like this? I am now the bearded lady.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, but I guess Drakos as a host, I can get used to it.
Sorry. Well, in week 3, we saw a lot of changes in the standings, with Vitality taking sole possession of first place ahead of Misfits and Giants. But even more interesting, the standings, I think, are how we saw each team's records last week. A lot of 2-0s, a lot of 1-1s, some teams even struggling in the 0-2 department. But Deficio, what stands out the most to you?
Ooh, I keep looking at Giants because I'm trying to figure out, do they belong at the top of the standings or will they fall down? 1-1 last week where they had a good comeback game against Rocket due to the famous Jinx traps now that we've seen so many times winning them a team fight. They did, however, get crushed by Schalke right after, so it's kind of tough to judge them, and I'll keep following them very closely to see if they can stay at the top.
And it's kind of a trend for these middle-of-the-pack teams. But Deficio, I'm unoriginal. I went with the easy one. You want someone coming out of a 3-loss streak? You want a 2-0? You look at G2 Esports. I feel like we have to talk about them. They're finally starting to get everything back together. They're starting to look like a good team once again. And the fact that they came in with 2-0, the fact that they're looking stronger, feels to me like this could be the chance for G2 to take over the league.
And I feel like we, together with Cold on the Euphoria podcast, kind of underrated G2 a little bit, putting them down at number 6. I think they're actually going to be one of the absolute best teams in Europe starting this week.
Starting this week, you're that confident?
I'm that confident.
I'm feeling good about it too. I want to see what exactly they can bring to the table, but coming into the week, Martin, you have your eyes on some key players, some big clutch performers that can bring in the wins for their teams. And who's the first player you want to talk about?
First player I'm going to talk about over here, the fancy new screens, it's going to be Rekkles. Their Summer Split MVP, of course, the biggest name in Europe. This man, fairly rough start to the split, but then last week against Rocket, he showed up big time because there was a lot more focus on suddenly grouping with the team and actually allowed him to use the early advantage he keeps getting in the laning phase to just take over the game. And it's very important for Fnatic that he's performing because the AD carry pool, Drakos, it's pretty stacked in Europe this year. We just have to say that there's so many new names that are worth looking at. But Rekkles is still the player everyone looks at and says this guy needs to be the best. So right now, I'm watching him very closely in this little quest to catch the current #1 AD carry and also my next player, Hans Sama, the young kid from Misfits who broke through doing Worlds, and he just keeps performing at the highest level. He's currently the main carrier in Misfits, and we just see perfect positioning from him in teamfights. And it's honestly hard to find a weakness in his play right now. So it's really cool to follow this progression from such a young AD carry who's now the best in Europe, in my opinion at least. Enough about AD carries though, Drakos.
Don't need him.
I want to talk about the man in the mid lane from Vitality, the Italian stallion. It is Xerxe, of course. This person, his name is on everyone's lips because he's so awesome. In game, he's aggressive. He's constantly confident in his ability to outplay people in 1v2, 1v3 situations. And I've never seen a rookie step on stage with this much confidence. And we just get to see highlight clips from this guy every single week. And if you have never watched a Vitality game or Xerxe game, it is time to watch one today because this man will always deliver.
and you're going to get a chance. You're going
Yes,
to
you
watch
will.
Xerxe in action, see what he can do in our second matchup of the day when Xerxe and Vitality face off against Rawcat. I want to see what they can bring to the table there, but also match of the week, Giants versus Misfits. You already brought up Giants,
Yes.
but this one, two teams tied at second place going toe-to-toe.
Two teams who can play late game for sure. It's how Giants win every single game so far. I want to see if they can keep doing it, especially against a great team like Misfits, because if they do, they for sure deserve to sit there at the top of the standings.
Absolutely. It's going to be a tough battle, though, I think, for both sides. Giants, not a lot of people had them on their radar, but you absolutely have to respect them now. Well, in our first game, we've got the struggling 1-5 H2k looking to pull off an upset with the support of some new manpower as they go up against a 3-3 Splyce. Let's leave it to our casters and hit the rift.
Thank you very much, Drakos. Hello, all you esports fans. I'm Devin Piratechnics Young. And alongside me is, of course, the Welsh wizard himself, the harbinger of ha-ha. It's Andrew Vedius Day. What's up, man?
Aha, good one, Pyra. I have him good. Happy to be here with you, Pyra. Looking forward to what will be a surprisingly exciting game.
Absolutely. H2k, they've been down in the dumps. They've had a lot of struggles. Let's take a look at this team because there's some new faces, or at least one new face, on the blue side today. For H2k, they got Selfie in the mid lane.
Oh, they do. They have Selfie up in mid. He will be taking Caedrel's spot, but that doesn't mean that Caedrel is in the bench position, Pyra. Caedrel is actually playing in the jungle alongside Selfie mid. So we've seen quite some interesting changes along this H2k roster.
Yeah, still putting their faith in the rookies, but mixing things up, shuffling the deck a little bit. Now, they need, honestly, all the help they can get because this team has lost 4 games in a row. So we have to ask this question, who can step up and turn the tide for this H2k team?
Yeah, and you have to wonder if it is going to be Selfie. This guy, he has quite a history behind his professional career. He started off with Super Hot Crew back in 2014, but in recent history, he's been playing on H2k and Misfits Academy back in 2016, and then in 2017, he played for Schalke in Europe in the Challenger Series, and then recently he was over in NA on Tempo Storm. So he's definitely been pretty active in the professional scene. He's a guy that's still keeping up with the mechanics. And the thing about him is he's an individual that in the past has always been known to be pretty lane dominant. Mechanically, he has a lot of experience, and he seems to be an individual that you can rely on to get those leads. The question is, how will he fit in with this lineup? Because yes, he's kind of the experienced player now alongside 2 rookies and some veterans in the form of Promisq and Smittyj up in the top lane.
Yeah, and H2k, I mean, they're changing things up now because they're looking for some answers, but the whole team has obviously made so many big changes. This was one of the top European organizations for a long time, always a playoff team, but now they've mixed things up, and with all these new players, it's so many question marks surrounding them.
Yeah, perhaps the bringing in of Caedrel to the jungle position is the hope that they will just see something different, because as you rightly said, this was one of the top teams in Europe. They were constantly fighting for those playoff spots. They were usually aiming for one of those top 4 positions. But in recent history, or at least with this iteration of the roster, things haven't gone well. So change is what they're looking for right now. And their opposition is a team that's no different to change either.
Absolutely. It's a tough opponent today, Splyce. They've taken down some big-name teams, Schalke, No Fear, Misfits. I mean, these guys are sitting at 3-3 right now, so it's definitely not doing too bad. And honestly, I want to highlight one potential weak point for this squad because it's got to be Odoamne, who, by the way, used to be on the H2k team, but things have changed for him since he has changed over to Splyce.
Yeah, this guy was one of the rocks, one of the staple, reliable players that, working alongside players like Jankos and Febiven, they were always able to put up good performances on that H2k roster. But since joining Splyce, individually, he seems to be not having the best laning phases. He doesn't seem to be working extremely well with his team. But it also ties in with the fact that Splyce, as a team, seem to be so focused towards the late game. They don't be building a lot. They aren't really focused on building a lot of early game advantages. They seem to be playing the current meta style of let's wait to 35 minutes onwards and then start playing some League of Legends. And this could look to hurt them, given how Odoamne in the past used to be so consistent in terms of his laning phase, and so where you could build a lot of advantages from.
Yeah, definitely seemed to stumble a little bit out of the gates, and we see the team oftentimes having to come back from some of those big deficits. And yes, it has been a little bit of a slower start, but up against this H2k team, even with the question marks, maybe this is where we get to see them come back online. We'll find out. We're entering picks and bans.
Now, A lot of the rest of the world has started playing on 8.2. We got to see a week of 8.2 last week, Pyra. Over in the LCK, specifically champions like Ezreal, still highly prioritized by a number of teams. And we do know that Sheriff, he does like to play those kind of champions. The Ezreal, the Kalista, all fit within his wheelhouse. Perhaps that's something H2k will look to prioritize later on into the draft. But Galio is a big pick for a lot of mid laners around the world, especially when you pair it up with the Camille, which is why H2k are just taking off the board right from the get-go.
It's not the only mid laner that's being banned out. The Azir also falls as well, and for Splyce, they spent their first 2 bans thrown directly at Selfie. However, they also throw in the Kalista to prevent Sheriff from getting his hands on it. That leaves the Zoe open, though, and it's insta-locked.
Last week, we saw a lot of early prioritization on the Zoe. Commonly, Malzahar is used as an answer to the Zoe, given that once you hit that level 6 mark, it becomes very easy to lock her down. But Malzahar did receive a couple of nerfs on 8.2, so either Nisqy will have something unique and interesting to bring out, or he'll stick with the standard meta stuff of Malz.
We'll have to find out. Should see that one in the first rotation before the next ban phase happens, but early jungler AD carry pickup. Kobbe gets his hands on the Caitlyn. Xerxe gets his hands on the Sejuani. Kobbe pretty scary on that Caitlyn, in all honesty. That's the champion you got the pentakill on.
Oh yes, this is definitely a big comfort pick for him. They're setting him up for success during the laning phase. We need to keep our eyes on what supports they're looking to focus, given that Tahm Kench is banned, but we are moving very quickly through this draft. We had a quick look at Caedrel's solo queue performances, and he loves electrocute junglers, Pyra. He loves getting in your face, he loves being able to deal damage, and you're expecting him to invest a lot of time in the mid lane, given that he is a former mid lane player.
Yeah, I would think he'd probably want to go back to his old home, so we'll look to see if he ends up camping out for Selfie's lane. For the time being, we still have to decide what Splyce is going to play up against the Zoe. A lot of flashes, a lot of hovers. We get the Camille locked in, though.
This is a very safe pick into the Gnar. We saw some mixed performances of it last week where on Vizicachi's hands, he was dumpstering Ruin up against the Gnar. However, in other hands, it struggled a little bit during the laning phase. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Odoamne, now that he's being put on a little bit more of a carry top laner, if he can return to form, if he can have a little bit more of an impact going up against Smittyj.
Yeah, I'd like to see if it ends up working out for them. And we get into the second phase of bans. You see Jinx taken off the table. Of course, that one is... we've seen it once so far, and it had a very impactful performance, but not in the hands of Sheriff. Now, the Malzahar is also banned away because Splyce did not opt to pick up their mid lane, so I wonder what Nisqy's going to go towards with so many mid laners drained out of the pool.
You would imagine that from Splyce's side, they ban away the Trist. And for H2k, looking at some of the other mid laners that could be available, you're now moving into a lot of the alternative mid lane options of things like, we've seen a bit of Kassadin, we've seen a bit of LeBlanc, a bit of Cassio, but you have to wonder what else is going to bring out. Maybe he goes to the Veigar. We've seen Nisqy bring this one out before, but I don't know if that's the best matchup. Nisqy's going to have to bring up something a little bit new, something creative going up against Selfie.
Yeah, well, even ban LeBlanc up against him. And we got the Twisted Fate lock in.
Okay, I like this. I
didn't believe my eyes for a second.
We did see the Twisted Fate over in North America. I believe it was Ryu that brought that one out. We can talk a little bit more about it in-game, but Twisted Fate, another unique champion going in the hands of Nisqy, an individual that has struggled over the last few weeks, but last week, he did suddenly seem to start stepping up his game. So I'm looking forward. We're definitely starting to see a 1-3-1 composition coming out from the side of Splyce, as H2k, they ran their composition out.
All right, so there's that Ezreal you were mentioning earlier on in the draft that's being prized by the Koreans at the moment, and the last pickup, we still have yet to see what Promisq will have for support. Very safe laner Ezreal is, even though you mentioned Kobbe being set up for that lane dominance. Still gonna have a hard time getting the poke right on back. Will this Taric come in to round things out and give him a solid front line?
Looking at this Taric, I mean, you have so much poke from H2k. I feel like you kind of want to round your composition out with an essence of disengage. But rather than go for something like the Janna, they're going for like an anti-team fight comp, which I don't know is necessarily the best thing against this Splyce roster that's going to be looking for picks, going to be looking to play the entire map a lot across all 3 lanes. And it's really just going to try and look for small opportunities rather than full-on 5v5 team fights.
Yeah, harder composition to run, but a little bit of comfort for Splyce. They were hovering on kaSing Zillion, but at the end of the day, he locks in the Janna. That's a champion that a lot of teams have actually banned against him, but he hasn't picked it up this split just yet. Now he'll get to try his luck on it. And speaking of luck, Nisqy's certainly feeling it right now.
I'm very excited to see this Twisted Fate. Definitely our first one here in Europe, going to be in the hands of Nisqy. In terms of the matchup, I mean, it can be a rough one for Twisted Fate. His early wave clear is not the strongest. It can be very easy for Selfie to position aggressively. And when you look at a jungler like Jarvan, especially in the hands of Caedrel, you're expecting a lot of early pressure from this H2k squad in the middle lane. Twisted Fate, once he gets level 6, he's going to want to look to roam around the map, use that ultimate to find picks, set up his laners for success. You have a Caitlyn, Janna in the bottom lane. They're going to be pushing, you're going to want to try and dive. So H2k is saying we have to shut this down early, and we have to stop this guy from roaming around the map. And to do that, you gank. You shut him down, you get him behind in levels. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Caedrel return home and see if he can snowball Selfie to success.
We'll see if Selfie in his return to the big stage here in Europe can put on an impressive performance. H2k infusing some new blood into their roster in the hopes to pick up their second win on the split. Splyce not keen to fall victim to it. Find themselves a little bit of a different style of composition. We'll find out who comes out on top. Splyce have definitely had some troubles in the early games, but they are no strangers to fighting back after a deficit. They don't really worry too much if they're not winning in the laning phase. But all eyes on Nisqy to start this game off.
I'm really looking forward to this, Pyro. We're not running the conventional full 5v5 teamfight comps. There's a lot more complexity and intricacy behind these two teams. And for H2k, who have been struggling, currently 1-5, going up against a 3-3 Splyce that are still a little bit inconsistent. They're both drafting very unique compositions. And we'll get to see how well this H2k roster will be able to come together and make it work.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. And there's always a lot that surrounds roster moves and role swaps, which we don't often see. Keeping an eye on how Caedrel actually performs in this new role of his. I mean, this is a guy that had not hit the EU LCS stage for some time. Or rather, he hadn't ever had a chance to really do it. He comes in, he plays mid for a little while, they swap him up to jungle. We'll see how he ends up doing.
Caedrel is definitely going to be one of our players to watch, but also this middle lane matchup is going to be so interesting. We already talked briefly in Champions Select about how Nisqy, as an individual, has been struggling, especially in weeks 1 and week 2. He was falling into deficits. Excuse me, he was finding it difficult to hold his own. Even when he had the winnable matchup and the losing matchup, he just seemed to be on the back end. But week 3, we started to see him have a little bit more of an impact. He almost got a solo kill down onto Perks.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So we're starting to see him return to form, and now he's playing Twisted Fate up against Selfie. And when you look at Selfie as an individual, yes, okay, he hasn't played in the European LCS for a while, but he does have a lot of experience. We talked about it at the very start in the intro, and you can just see he's recently played in the NA Challenger Series. Back in spring, he played in the European Challenger Series, and the last time he was in the LCS, he did play on H2k back in 2016 spring.
Yeah, fun fact, this is actually his 50th game in the EU LCS in total, so that stretches across a period of several years. And it is funny that he kind of bounced around a lot and did a lot of hard training. The guy's definitely been busy throughout several scenes, Challenger, NAEU, all that good stuff. Kind of like a quick hyperbolic time chamber coming back to EU now.
And he, as a mid laner during the Challenger Series, was always known for being lane dominant. He loves to be in your face, he loves to try and trade, and he basically just loves to shut down his opponents. He now has gotten a very early teleport, but what I expect to see from him is once Caedrel starts putting a little bit of pressure towards the enemy jungle, the Nisqy's forced to play back, and Selfie can look to try and jump in, get those sleepy trouble bubbles down, and then just throw as much harass down onto his lane opposition as possible. Because as you can see, Nisqy already struggling with the wave clear. Doesn't have that much in early levels. Also picked up a minion dematerializer just to help out with that early wave pressure. And his goal in the early game is simply to farm.
Yep. Of course, that minion dematerializer matched by Selfie early on, and you mentioned his tendency wanting to get in the face of the enemy player. I feel like Zoe's almost a perfect champion to do that.
Yes. Certainly is the case. So we've talked a lot about the middle lane part. We've also got to talk about the top lane, because one of our big narratives was about Odoamne and not really having the best of performances after now joining this new roster on Splyce and being in a brand new environment.
Absolutely, and Odo, it's interesting that he picks this matchup that, you talked about Camille being relatively favorable into the Gnar because she can shut him down. Odo's always kind of prided himself on taking some of these suboptimal matchups, and we're seeing that change now, that he maybe doesn't feel quite the same level of confidence that he has had in the past. Now, Caedrel's actually coming up here to try and shut him down. He might have to end up burning his flash here as he sees the flag and drag. It's knocked up. There's the flash going, followed by Smittyj. Nearly complete on the Gnar bar. Do they want to dive this? No, Xerxe's here.
Smittyj thinks he has the damage to try and continue on with the chase. Unfortunately, for him. Xerxe did show up in the top lane and was able to dissuade the dive. So H2k, with the first successful gank, we'll get a summoner spell out from Odo.
Another one now, too.
But you talked a little bit about the matchup, and it's quite fascinating because early levels really, because of the range advantage that Gnar has and the difficulty for Odoamne to really go for the all-in, you will often see Smittyj, the Gnar usually get an early lead. The difference is that Odo can trade back pretty effectively because you'll note he is running the Comet. So he'll use his leg sweep to harass a bit, get a bit of slowdown, get a bit of poke down, and then once he hits level 6, that's when he can start being a little more aggressive. That's when he can threaten the all-in, especially once he completes the Trinity Force. He's going to win out on the side lane, especially up against this Gnar.
Of course, when a Gnar can't split push, he's going to have a bit of a bad time, but for Smittyj as a player, he's honestly been one of the brighter spots on this H2k team. And, you know, maybe that's not as much to say when a team's sitting at 1-5 on the record, but if Odoamne is the weak point on the Splyce roster, you got to think the exact opposite about Smittyj.
Yeah, I mean, up in the top lane, this guy has been one of the individuals that we thought maybe H2k could look to try and play around. It feels like that he has been playing a lot of carries over the last few weeks, and he's been never properly set up to carry, even though he's playing those styles of champions. And while he is playing the Gnar, I feel like the focus will be more on H2k's mid and jungle and how well Caedrel and Selfie will perform. But we talk about the big carries, we've got to look at the big carries for Splyce, right? Down in the bottom lane, Kobbe and kaSing, two of the most consistent performers of this roster. And you talked to me before earlier in rehearsals about this kaSing effect, Pyro.
Yeah. kaSing, you know, back in the day, we had this wonderful little video about it. He came into the H2k lineup along with Odoamne back in 2016 and really kind of turned Jarvan, their AD carry at the time, into like this superstar. Smittyj was getting like crazy kills on Sivir and stuff, and that's the kaSing effect. He levels up his AD carry. Now, Kobbe's always been a good AD player, but I think we're honestly seeing his potential unlocked even more so now that kaSing is alongside him.
Yeah, you just have to look at some of the stats across the board. Both of these individuals are heavily involved in all of the action that happens from the side of Splyce. Their kill participation is extremely high for a bottom lane. Their damage percentage from Kobbe is crazy. He is the guy that they rely on to be the big carry, and usually we see him paired up with the Zilean, and in the mid game he can just run up, deal all this damage, and then get out. But now he's going to be on the Janna against Splyce, allowing this bottom lane to help facilitate each other, to rely on Kobbe to be this big cat.
And they're comfortable, right? I mean, you look at these two carries right there. Now, Smittyj up the top, we're going to switch our attention for a sec. Face checks into Xerxe, is going to get the stop up against the wall. And meanwhile, he pushes him right back in before he goes mini Gnar. And Nisqy comes in to complete the gang squad. Instant first blood for the Splyce mid laner.
Fantastic coordination and timing there from Splyce. They knew that Smittyj did not have his flash available after he used it in the top lane gank. Xerxe was just in the area, and he punishes Smittyj as he tries to ward, and then Nisqy, the moment he hits level 6, he has the ultimate ready. We didn't see many early ganks from H2k around the middle lane, so Nisqy had nothing to worry about. He's able to get himself a very early kill.
Yeah, all that focus we expected around the mid lane didn't really materialize. Caedrel, yeah, he's been involved, he's been around, but it was mostly up top that we see him trying to get the gank off on Odoamne. Instead, it looked like Xerxe was the one who had the more effective action when they caught on to Smittyj, and as a result, Nisqy gets the first kill of the game. We might see a lot more of that before this is all said and done.
That is the expectation that we have. Nisqy on this Twisted Fate will look to roam around the map a lot more as the game progresses. Looks like he's gone for very early Merc Treads.
Yep.
And he is running the Unsealed Spellbook as well. He did start off with a cleanse, changed it to TP after Selfie made that TP in the mid. So here we are. They're expecting this ward to come. Xerxe is lying in wait. There is no flash for Smittyj. He just used his jump, which meant that he couldn't get over the wall. And the combined CC of all three members makes it a very easy early kill in favor of Splyce. And it's fascinating, Pyra, because for Splyce, they're the team that has the longest average game time, right? Whereas for H2k, they have the shortest average game time.
In all fairness, though, H2k, it seems like all those happen because their opponent team takes Baron, and that's the end of the game.
Yeah, unfortunately for H2k, they tend to do okay in the early laning phase. Often they draft to late game, but then what happens is they make one crucial mistake in the mid that ends up falling apart. Whereas for Splyce, they're this team that, even though they fall into early deficits, they're actually really good at just making sure that early deficit doesn't snowball into a massive deficit.
They're game managers.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then it gets to the late game, and then they're in a decent position where their comp is scaled up, and that's when they can start to fight back. In this game, ooh, that was a long bubble. He managed to spot him out on that ward that was just near the wolves. For Splyce in this composition, they've been able to get an early lead. Their composition does scale pretty well when you have a Caitlyn and you have the Twisted Fate late game damage. Their sieging is very effective. But again, they're very much playing around the 1-3-1 composition. It's important to have your side laners ahead when you're trying to draft a split push style. Which is why getting this early kill on Nisqy is very good. But now H2k, they're trying to answer.
See if they can get the gank off on Odo. He's able to sidestep out the bubble. Battlestar, however, smacks him upside the head. Smittyj is going to get some free time on tower as a result. Meanwhile, Splyce, though, the remaining members on the bottom start off on this Ocean Drake. Pretty easy for them to take, no contest. Of course, vision control for Splyce around the pit allowed them to make it happen, and they knew Selfie was up top.
Like the punish here from Splyce, very quick to react. The moment that they were able to spawn out Selfie towards the top side, immediately able to secure a dragon. But we can see that the top side of the map is littered with wards for H2k. Odoamne left on a bit of an island, but he's going for the all-in.
Oh, well, he's got to have some backup. There we go. In comes Nisqy with the Destiny, and Smittyj just trying to make it a 1-for-1 trade instead. They're going to make it nice and safe, and a couple of cards later, Nisqy finds himself kill number 2. He's feeling lucky.
Love this proactivity from Nisqy. He gets himself the first blood. He makes a good TP play up top. And we're able to see what is an instant repeat. Now, Odo, he did miss the initial stun, but the great thing about Nisqy is he was just offset by that ward that's just by the Raptors. You can see it on your mini-map, which meant that Smittyj wasn't expecting this at all. He didn't respect Nisqy's ability to immediately transfer up into the top lane. And I love this from Splyce because we were just talking about how all the reliance goes towards the bottom lane, how you need Kobbe and kaSing to do well and then transition their lead into the mid and late game. Whereas for Nisqy and Odo, they're now being proactive themselves. We see Xerxe spending a lot more time around the top side. We're seeing Nisqy get 2 early kills, and Odo is not struggling during the laning phase. And I think that for Splyce fans, this is definitely the direction they want to be seeing the team take.
And it's critical considering how much pressure that H2k have been trying to put up towards the top lane, and Odoamne is getting a little bit of backup for himself because Nisqy hasn't been able, or hasn't had too much pressure on him either. So it's kind of a, you know, snowball in multiple lanes, the fact that they can just take one advantage and move it elsewhere with all the globals.
Now, H2k have recognized that bot tower will eventually crumble against a Caitlyn and a Janna, so they've decided to swap up, also trying to get Smittyj out of what will be a very difficult matchup now that Odo has the Sheen and the Tiamat completed. But Splyce will be able to secure their first tower of the game, and given that Twisted Fate's ultimate is still down, it's unlikely that they'll be able to try and force an early tier 2 in the bot.
Our first tower blood does go the way of Splyce. H2k are going to answer pretty quickly, forcing Odoamne off and trying to starve him of a little bit of these minions, but the rest will be there for him to pick up. So now the map opens up a little more. Objective-based gameplay is the name of the game for Splyce. For H2k, they're kind of left to really pick up as many pieces as they can. Teleport's coming back into mid, but no one else is going to be around to contest this Rift Herald.
Do you like this vision that H2k have set up around Splyce's jungle? You can see wards littered to all of the entrances, so they're very aware of any of the movements that Splyce try to make to contest this Rift Herald. Now, this will make sieging the mid lane that much easier. This is something else we need to take into consideration. Twisted Fate, his wave clear is decent, but not until the later levels. He's only really good at clearing out those caster minions. So when you have a Rift Herald on your side, it's going to be challenging for Splyce to deal with it. Depends on how Splyce will answer as H2k start to group up in the mid.
See if they end up using it, popping the eye of the Rift Herald right now. 4 members strong. That should be enough to start the siege. Will they be able to secure it is the question. Nisqy trying to clear away the wave. He's in danger of being doped, so he might have to back off, and pings on, but not a whole lot of help here. Xerxe is there, and there's not much they can do about it, so H2k pick up a much-needed tower here. And that gold lead that Splyce had starting to fall off a little bit as a True Shot Barrage helps save a few more ticks to the tower, but Kobbe's got the rest of it, so they're going to equalize right after the fact. Splyce finding themselves in an unusual situation. They've got a gold lead, Vedius.
Yeah. We have seen in the past that Splyce, the one game where they were able to get that, I mean, they've been able to get a few early gold leads, but I distinctly remember the one game where they did get that early gold lead. They were running the Skarner, and then they ended up losing it after a couple of messy plays on their end.
That was a weird game.
Yeah, hopefully
let's be honest there.
Look to repeat that this time around. I believe it was up against Roccat. But so far, Splyce hold a pretty significant gold advantage. A lot of that does come from the 2 kills that were picked up in the mid, but also the pretty significant CS lead that has been starting to accrue for Kobbe. So things looking good for Splyce. as we do jump into what appears to be a very quick pause.
Yeah, a little bit of confusion, it looks like, on some of the players' faces. But taking stock of the whole situation, it's been a very clean early game. Splyce find themselves up 2 kills. Of course, they're on Nisqy. And I want to go back to what you said at the start of the game, is how Nisqy kind of started off this split, and he didn't really look incredibly impressive. I think a lot of people didn't know what to make out of this guy because he had been at least somewhat hot coming off of Fnatic Academy, but then he went off to NA and was kind of for a little while.
That's very true.
He comes
had that
back.
One good quarterfinal match, I seem to remember.
I forget who it was against, but yeah, Nisqy, I think a lot of questions around this guy and his return to the EU LCS, but now we're finally starting to see it come to fruition. And I'm really, really curious to see, as the game goes on, how he ends up doing in this different kind of matchup up against the likes of Selfie, who is such an experienced player, but has kind of been so up and down throughout his career.
Well, so far, Selfie has been able to build a bit of a CS advantage, but that's been kind of matched by the fact that Nisqy has 2 kills. He's lost that farm as a result of roaming that have been 2 successful roams. So I think that the matchup is going pretty even for the time being. I expected a little bit more focus from Caedrel in the middle lane to try and shut down the Twisted Fate, which we haven't really seen. We did see a gank from Caedrel up towards the top side where they got a flash, but because Smittyj used his flash as well, that ended up actually hurting him more than it ended up helping him.
Yeah, once you've burned the flash, you better bet you're going to get ganked again. Now,
exactly that.
Just to fill you guys in on a lot of the information that I'm getting from the back, it is that there's an audio issue currently on stage, and there are league officials investigating how well the players are able to communicate. That was instigated by H2k, so that's why we're seeing them on the camera. So league officials looking that over for the time being.
Relatively important that you can hear your...
Yeah, it's kind of necessary for team communication.
Yeah. Or you can just communicate through pings, as I know many solo queue players love to do.
That is, well, you know, that's why you only get so many of those pings. You have a quota.
Exactly that.
You don't want to be filling all that dead space.
Yep. So while this pause is continuing on, we can talk a little bit about how, you know, this is nice to see from Splyce. I had a very insightful conversation with Peter Dunn, the coach for Splyce, where I talked to him a lot about what happened last week against G2, because he was pretty vocal on Twitter about how he wasn't happy with the draft. He felt like that he had let his team down, and if you ever have the opportunity to talk to him, you will recognize that a lot of what the pros say is accurate. He's very intelligent about the game. He clearly puts a lot of time and effort into thinking about it. And it's fascinating how he looks at the draft and how he thinks about things like the range differential between the 2 sides. So, for example, in this situation, you see that Zoe and Ezreal have a lot of poke from a very long range. And that's why we see an answer in terms of Caitlyn and Twisted Fate. And you can close the gap on that range or to a degree match it, or sometimes in the case of Caitlyn, even outrange it. So you have answers to these kinds of things. And it feels like that a lot of things are thought out from Splyce. And whenever you look at their draft, there's always a very clear game plan in advance. That's why we actually saw a surprisingly fast draft from the side of Splyce this time around. And it's something that they put a lot of time and effort into. And often you can question a lot of some of the decisions that they make, and maybe at first glance you think, oh, the draft makes sense, but there's always a lot of thought and planning that goes into especially their draft phase. And it was interesting how what he was telling me was that right now they kind of draft fairly simple compositions because the roster's new. They're still getting used to meshing well together. But once they've had more experience and practice together, they're going to look to play slightly more complex comps. And I think this is the first iteration where we're seeing the 1-3-1 style, where they are playing a composition that does require you to get early leads on your solo laners, to then start playing around all 3 lanes, having good setup on vision. And it'll be fascinating to see if Splyce can maintain that as the game progresses.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the centerpiece. That is the Twisted Fate. I'm here, we're going to replay of the couple of kills that Nisqy has picked up already, and I really like what he was able to do on those roams. So here's the first one, where Smittyj just gets caught by Xerxe and Odo.
Yeah, so again, the thing is, Smittyj had already used his flash, and if he was able to flash over the wall with a blast cone there, maybe he could have gotten out, but unfortunately he didn't have it. And here, this is just another great utilization of the Twisted Fate. Not that much damage in the early game, but fortunately Odo was there to help facilitate, and then Nisqy is very easily able to clean up the kill. So a lot more investment towards the top side. We talked a little bit about it during the cast, where Splyce often don't really do much in the early game. They rely a lot more on their bottom lane to then carry them in the mid to late. But now that we've started to see these advantages being built, you've got to look and think, oh, this is pretty exciting for Splyce. Now they're getting themselves early leads. They still have their reliable bottom lane. What can they now do with it, and how quickly can they close out this game?
Now, while the pause is still ongoing, guys, just got another update for you. The audio issues have been resolved, but kaSing has been allowed a personal pause from league officials as he is currently feeling unwell So in the midst of all that pause, we kind of have another reason to keep the pause going. But back to your point, Vedius, I think that it's really nice to see them building these really clean advantages earlier on. Maybe they thought, hey, this is the kind of team to test this composition out against. And so far, honestly, so good. They're building up advantages, and when you have a 1-3-1 composition, it doesn't hurt you to get a nice little lead early on in the game.
Yeah, definitely a big thing. But we've also got to turn our attention to H2k as well, because we talked a lot about Splyce. We looked at how they're looking to play their draft. But the thing about H2k is they have the Zoe, they have the Ezreal. They have an ability to play the poke. Applause coming for
kaSing is back.
As he returns to his seat. And the one thing that's going to be difficult to play around H2k's comp is the fact that they do have all this poke and pick potential, right? You have the Zoe, who can sit off in the darkness and fire those sleepy trouble bubbles out from nowhere. You also have Ezreal that's consistently spamming Qs, and even though the nerf to Kleptomancy on 8.2, he's still going to hit a much earlier power spike than he traditionally would due to this influx of gold. So I wouldn't say that H2k are completely out of the game yet. They're at a slight early deficit, only about 1.5k gold, but now that all of the issues have been resolved, we can get back into the League of Legends action.
Yes, we can. Just checking back in. We're just shy of the 14-minute mark, and yes, Splyce had those early advantages. Of course, some of that mitigated by the gold differentials. Sheriff has his Iceborne Gauntlet stacking up his tier, so we'll see that full strength of Blue Ezreal coming a little later in the game. We talked about the Splyce 1-3-1 a lot, right? But you mentioned the poke damage. I think H2k honestly have a pretty scary fight on top of just being able to catch people out. So Splyce got to be careful. They have to navigate this one very gingerly.
I think H2k have good team fighting. I'm a little confused as to what the intent of this Taric pick is, right? Because when we've seen Taric picked in the past, he's been kind of comboed with things like a Zac to set up for really good pick power, because you team up, you use your Bastion with the jungler, you then have the jungler dive in, and then you have an extra stun to add to the range of those engages. So I can see how it could perhaps be paired up with the Jarvan, but typically you would pick a Taric as like an anti-team fight tool. He can reset things for you thanks to his ultimate, but Splyce is never really looking for full 5v5s. They want to try and spread you out thin. They want to go for small skirmishes where this value is significantly less on the side of H2k.
You are correct. I just wanted to point out that that was a little unlucky.
A little unfortunate.
Yeah, Selfie trying to get that blue buff, but the red of Caedrel stole it away.
The inner mid in him took over. Caedrel just couldn't restrain himself.
I want that blue buff. Need the mana regen. All right, Smittyj trying to hold out on this bottom side. Of course, Odo's not going to go too deep right now. Splyce can afford to play this one out pretty safely without fear of overextending. Or without overextending, I should say.
Now the dragon spawning in about 10 seconds. Look at all the control wards coming out from Splyce right now. They have 4 littered across the entirety of their half of the map, along with a couple of the entrances to the side of H2k's jungle. Their goal now will be to set up vision around this Drake. They'll have Odoamne push out topside, where the bottom lane of H2k is right now, which means that they won't be able to react in time once Splyce start this Drake off. So I expect them to push in mid with the Caitlyn, then have perhaps the Twisted Fate just clear out the bottom wave, but it is pushing in their favor, and I expect a fairly clean Dragon take to come out from the side of Splyce.
All right, so the game plan continues. Xerxe is going to start this one off. Of course, H2k none the wiser. Oh, never mind, they are. There's a control ward right in the back of the pit that I missed. Xerxe has enough damage, along with his AD carry and support to make it happen. However, it looks like H2k are just going to be focused on trying to push up towards topside, but the Taric's not with the Ezreal. Not really sure what H2k are doing here, other than trying to grab a little extra vision as a consolation.
Well, they are getting a bit of vision control up in the top side of Splyce's jungle, and they thought they could put some pressure down onto this tower, but you're playing up against a Twisted Fate. And a 2 versus 2, Camille Twisted Fate versus Ezreal Taric. I kind of have my bets on the Cardmaster, to be honest. So H2k immediately have to back off. They don't really get anything aside from all this deep vision. But we're only 16.5 minutes into the game, Pirate. There's no bound to play around just yet. And this information will only help in knowing where Xerxe is.
Yeah, for H2k, though, a lot of their early game trying to rely on making sure they could bully out Nisqy. That plan is pretty much kaput. Got a little bit of a CS advantage, and that's about it. Of course, more than made up for the fact that he's got those 2 kills. But for the rest of H2k, you know, where are they going to put their eggs at this point? Smittyj, he's on the Gnar. He can do a little bit of damage. He can set them up in those team fights. The Ezreal seems to be the logical choice along with the Zoe, but it still takes a while for them to come online.
So That was actually a really good clear. I mean, it was a fortunate clear from the side of Splyce, because one of the big risks Splyce just had there was that they could get TP flanked on from the side of H2k. You send the Taric and the Ezreal bot, you have the Jarvan move up through the river where you hope you have vision control, and then you have the TP flank come in. The bottom lane of Splyce die around when Baron is nearly spawning. That allows you a very quick objective secure. But because they spotted it out, Splyce now can read this play from H2k, and immediately are able to disengage and stay safe. And that's why sweepers are so important, Pyra. That's why you want to make sure that you have that vision security around this area of the map, especially when you know your enemy has spent so long around that portion.
Yeah. Public service announcement, always upgrade your trinkets. kaSing checking a little forward, but he spotted by Promisq. Both dual laners up towards the top side. We start to see a few more of these items coming in and completed. 6 stacks on the Twisted Fates Rod of Ages as well, so it's not the only stacking we're thinking about with the Ezreal.
You bring up a good point there. For those that may not recognize, this is the common Twisted Fate build that we do see, the Rod of Ages into the Lich Bane, usually into his Zhonya's shortly after. Not in terms of the highest burst damage, but it gives you an extra bit of tankiness. It will have reliable damage. It gives you nice siege opportunity. But then once he, I would imagine, goes for the Death Cap and the Void Staff, that's when you'll really start to see the punch that Nisqy will be able to provide.
Of course, Selfie will be able to match that pound for pound, but he's got to hit those paddle stars first.
He's going to hit much bigger spikes much sooner as well. You imagine that he's going to go for the Leandries next, but he may choose to deviate and go for a very early Death Cap. Instead, his eyes are right now on in the middle lane. We see 4 members grouped up. They want to try and punish relatively the wave fit on this Twisted Fate.
Might be in control of the top jungle. Ooh, clutch. Use the blast cone to pop Kobbe over the wall, avoid that Sleepy Trouble bubble. And now the rest of Splyce, a 4-man squad. Lost a lot of vision there in the top side jungle, so H2k kind of outmuscled them to grab some of it. And Baron is spawning very soon.
I don't think H2k have the fastest Baron take, so they're going to really have to win a fight or get a good pick if they're hoping to secure that objective. Now Splyce are the ones setting up the siege, but you can see the poke power of H2k's composition, along with the pick potential. The Jarvan Taric combo, always a possible threat that they have to respect. So Splyce, they don't want a hard commit. So now we're in a bit of a stalemate, Pyra, waiting for that Baron to spawn.
Yeah.
And we'll start to see Splyce hopefully play this 1-3-1 style. You can already see Odoamne down in the bottom lane. I imagine he's going to back soon to pick up his Trinity Force. And then after he's got that, he will continue to apply pressure on towards Smittyj. He should now have kill threat over his lane opponent. And then you just kind of want to spread H2K's threat. In the moment that they are in a bad position, you can look to try and rush down the Baron. They have a relatively good Baron clear with the Caitlyn and the Twisted Fate. So we'll have to see how Splyce play the next few steps.
It's 2-item Caitlyn. Of course, Kobbe didn't get too many chances to play that Caitlyn after he picked up the pentakill not too many games ago. Sped up by the Zillion. The siege is still on for Splyce, but a lot of wave clear. That goes along with that poke that H2k's composition's bringing to the party. We're at that 20-minute mark. We're just past it, in fact, and Baron is, of course, going to be the objective that people are keeping an eye on, even if they can't take it right away. H2k very keen to make sure they control as much vision around this riverside as much as they possibly can. But Splyce, they can afford to play that slow, steady game. They don't need a full commit to the engage, although Xerxe does whiff out on an ultimate. He's caught up by the rest of the team. H2k, they want to get that pick, but they've caught the tankiest member, and they don't have enough damage.
Smittyj has grouped up with his team. Selfie as well, but now he immediately has to go back towards the bot side. Odoamne didn't feel the need to TP into that exchange. Xerxe very tanky already, given he has completed the Cinderhawk. Also has the stopwatch available. Something that we have been seeing a multiple of the time. Also running the Aftershock, so slight deviation from the Fleet Footwork and Unsealed Spellbook that we have been seeing. Definitely going for the tankier option.
He wants to stop the ground. Sheriff Promisq continuing to try and shove Nisqy back here. The rest of H2k still on a warding spree throughout this jungle. They do not want to give Baron Nashor up to Splyce. But all the while, pressure keeps creeping forward, slower and slower. Odoamne on the bottom side. You mentioned kill pressure on this Gnar. Well, Trinity Force and everything. I mean, how long is it going to be before he just decides to hit the go button? We know Odo has done that a lot in the past.
Oh, yes. He's actually now moving with his team because he wants to help them secure some vision in Splyce's half of the map. He's picked himself up 2 control wards. Oh, shame on Nisqy. He decided to buy an amp tone instead of getting himself some control wards. greedy.
Very
mid laner.
greedy.
Very, very
He's already got
greedy.
2 kills. What does he need
Exactly,
more damage
right?
for? Come on.
No control wards on Kobbe either. Shameful, absolutely shameful. But Splyce doing a good job of reclaiming some of the vision back. H2k throwing out what poke they can. They're the ones claiming mid priority right now. And their eyes are potentially set on this dragon. With so many members of Splyce in the top end, H2k should be able to secure this relatively uncontested, but there is the Twisted Fate ultimate.
Yeah, they wanted to try and make it happen. But this is another Ocean Drake. They've already got 2 in their back pocket. Feeling confident they can give up 1 to H2k without too much trouble. Let's see what they get for theirs, though. Just a few more wards down and still trying to siege this mid, but it does feel very much like a stalemate, Vedius. You're talking about how H2k are sniffing for those picks and trying to find an opportunity and an opening to really punish Splyce, but Splyce just keep playing this guerrilla warfare. They're going to come in, they're going to grab an objective, or they're going to grab some wards, they're going to run away.
Feels like both teams playing quite patiently. I'm curious because I'm not entirely sure how H2k are going to take advantage of their composition to really punish this Splyce roster, because usually what you'd want against a 1-3-1 kind of comp is to force them into a fight, because while their composition has a lot of strong duelists in terms of the 5v5, they're not actually that great. But for H2k, they don't exactly have the best 5v5 either. There's a lot of single target damage. Even if Smittyj lands a multi-man Gnar ultimate down, you have the Janna for the disengage, right? So I feel like Splyce have a lot of tools in their comp to answer a lot of what H2k brought to the table. Splyce should be able to hold their own in terms of the range. They can deal with the Zoe by, rather than grouping up, they split apart, and then only one lane has to deal with her threat. I feel like H2k have drafted themselves into a bit of a corner, but that's where we see the introduction of Caedrel and Selfie. Can these 2 new members on H2k provide a little bit more confidence, or they take a bit of a gamble and look to try and force some kind of a play somewhere, given that the Baron is now alive?
Well, we didn't see a ton out of the very early game. Caedrel did utilize this Jarvan to try and gank up topside, up on Odoamne, if you remember. Now that attempt didn't really yield any fruit for the team. Selfie, though, the dominant laning phase kind of didn't pan out too much for this guy, and maybe it's because he just hasn't been on the stage in a while. Maybe, he wasn't as comfortable on Zoe or some of these other meta mid laners. He used to be known as like this big Victor player. Talia was a big one for him. Victor, of course, we're not going to see that for another patch or 2. Let's see what H2k do here. Rift, Scuttler, vision secured for Splyce, so they're not going to be able to start off this Baron. And even if they could, Kobbe and Xerxe are here.
You've got to look at the mini-map at this point in the game, because it's all about vision and where the lanes are at. Bot lane is being pushed in favor of Splyce. H2k just have to answer the minion wave up in the top lane, so you can see Selfie is there. But the problem for Splyce is that Nisqy just decided to go back. He wanted to pick up his Zhonya's. Now that he's at 3 items, what he'll do is move off into the top lane. He's also picked himself up the Ghost, which is why he's staying towards topside, because he can use his ultimate to then quickly join the Baron in the event that starts. They will keep Kobbe and kaSing around the middle lane, and you'll just keep pushing vision, pushing vision. And you'll want to get your vision deeper and deeper and deeper on the side of Splyce. Whereas H2k, they're looking to try and punish Splyce when they then look to set up that vision, because they do have this pick potential with the Jarvan, with the Zoe.
Now, one big point here for H2k, though, is the fact these guys, we've talked about, the reason they have such short game times when they lose is because it's one big mistake from them that ends up getting
around
turns into a big
game,
right around this time of the game. So if they last that out, we're already seeing that improvement, Vedius.
Yes, we are.
So maybe, and remember, the longest H2k game was the one they won against Fnatic.
Yeah. Oh, I love that ward, by the way. You can see just a little red ward just outside the pit, very close to the wall of the Baron. It's been put there by Splyce. There you go. Thank you, observers, for pointing that one out. This ward I absolutely love. Would highly recommend those playing solo queue always drop your ward here, because people fight in the mid.
Yes, we do indeed, but the Cosmic Radiance is going to come in, keep Sheriff alive. Now Nisqy's going to throw one more gold card out, and the rest of his hand as well. Promisq, though, is only tickled by that one, and the minion wave is not going to last too long. kaSing puts on the Monsoon. A poke from the Zoe's going to land, so Splyce try to get a quick fight in the mid lane, but it's foiled by H2k, the disengage of their own. Things are a little topsy-turvy right now with what teams want to do.
So here, I think the engage from Splyce was fine, because they forced a lot of summon spells out from H2k. They're actually going in again.
Yeah, they found the stun off onto Selfie, and he's got a flash in his back pocket and another flash on his summoner spell. Looks like they're not going to need either of those once Splyce, this time trying once more for the mid engage. Still haven't been able to crack that outer tower in the mid lane.
So remember, The thing about 1-3-1 is, yes, while you want to be playing side lanes, you can also force fights once you see the enemy team also in a side lane, because you know you have a numbers advantage, and even if your composition is not designed for a full 5v5, you're more likely going to win a 5 versus 3, right? So by trying to force a play in the mid lane, that was their goal, and you can see they got the flash and the heal out from Sheriff. They were able to get the ignite out from Promisq as well, and they were even able to get the TP from Smittyj. So the overall gains for Splyce were very positive, because now Odo can continue to threaten in the side lane. It becomes much easier for Splyce to threaten that Baron as well, because Smittyj either has to walk up or run the risk of Splyce forcing a 5 versus 4. And you can see how difficult this situation is for Smittyj right now, because he won't be able to join as readily as Odoamne will be. So Splyce overall gained a lot, even though they didn't get any kills or objectives. But they now need to utilize this window as fast as possible.
This game of inches, and if you can turn those into feet, turn those into miles, you can take the game. But we're 28 minutes in, and it's still a very, very close game in terms of gold, in terms of towers, dead on even. The pressure, though, the big pressure point that Splyce keep pressing is down on that bottom side with Odoamne constantly giving Smittyj a hard time. And he has had a difficult game. Now the Twisted Fate once again looking to rejoin on the mid. The rest of the pinks flying now. We'll still check in down bot as Odoamne is going to get a little bit of assistance, but Smittyj wise to those tricks. It only works a couple of times before the Gnar decides to back up, even in Mega form, so that's going to get burned, and now H2k making a beeline for the Baron. Let's see if they start this one off. Redemption in to keep him nice and healthy, but there's a blue trinket in. They know the what is coming. Let's see if Splyce can take the fight. Now they forced H2k off, and they don't take any damage of their own. Another attempt from H2k to make something happen, and Splyce are able to foil it.
The goal here from H2k was to try and force Splyce into TPing or reacting to the Baron that was being started. Unfortunately for H2k, they got pushed off the Baron by only 3 members of Splyce, which meant that Nisqy and Odo could just walk from bot to mid and secure themselves that town. Now they found a stun.
Oh man, Caedrel, he's gonna get chunked down, has to pop his... He's on his hourglass, and he's going to get taken out. The Cosmic Radiance comes a little too late as Kobbe picks up his first kill of the game. 3-0. And all of a sudden, we're starting to get some action here. Vedius in the mid lane, nearing on 30 minutes on the clock. There's a Baron, there's an Infernal Dragon. Splyce are going to opt for the latter.
You have to wonder why Caedrel decided to use the stopwatch there when he had his flash. He had a Taric ultimate on the way. Perhaps he was just buying time for the Taric ultimate to come in. But unfortunately, he ended up getting stunned by Xerxe's ulti, meaning he could not get in range to help his jungler. That meant that he ended up getting picked off. He ends up losing his life and gives away a free Infernal. Now H2k hanging around this Baron, but Splyce are very aware of what is going on. They secure another objective, and they extend their gold lead ever so slightly.
And H2k just decided to clear out some vision. It looked like for a second maybe they were going to full commit to it, but now they backed away. Now Caedrel is going to throw down the flag, and he gets caught up by the gold card. You know the rest.
So he gets instantly stunned here, and you can see, look, the Taric cannot get in range because he was rooted. I just wonder why. If he has time to press stopwatch, he also has time to flash. So it just makes me wonder why Caedrel didn't just spam his flash to get out of there. But I guess he will now still have it.
Yeah, he was saving it for later.
Yeah, maybe.
Just checking the time. All right, so there will be another Infernal that spawns up. That's going to be a while, by the way, and yeah, I think we can all agree Deficio. I'd like to see a little bit more action in this one,
It's
but Splyce is very
macro
safe.
game, Pyro. It's all about these teams playing the mind.
Screw that, man. I want to see some fighting. 5v5 in the mid lane. Let's go. I know that's not what they're trying to do, but still.
That's also just not really Splyce. If we get to 50 minutes, then maybe we can see that kind of style, but...
We do see some really good fights in the late game from Splyce. Like, it always seems like they have to come back against all odds. So I'm almost worried that they're ahead at this point, because I don't know what they're going to do.
Oh, how will they handle having a lead?
It's very strange.
So far, they've been able to maintain control. They have 3 Drakes under their belt, and it looks like a 4th one will spawn. And look at the positioning of Nisqy right now.
Yeah, he's looking
sitting
for any
in the
opening.
river, trying to find a pick onto Smittyj. Does have flash and TP, but we saw Vitality picking a similar structure. Here we go.
All right, coming in for the 1-2 special. No Mega Gnar, no problem. Nisqy with kill number 3.
And now they can just rush this tower down. H2k, yes, they can try and force the Baron, but TP still available for Odo.
They got to stop the backs. Chase them down here. Let's see what they can do. And not a whole lot of minions on the down, but that's a lot of damage that they're dishing between Nisqy and Odoamne, and Splyce are even going to go ahead and clear away some vision from the Baron, but H2k get nothing out of this.
Perfect split push play coming out from Splyce right now. H2k are being run around the map. Nisqy.
He's going to low. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of chunk damage, both sides. And Cosmic Radiance on. Let's see if H2k can get something back for their troubles. No, it is just one dazzling stun. But Splyce are going to be able to walk away from it safely. What's going on? Meanwhile, up near the Baron pit, 3 members trapping off and cordoning off the side of the pit.
Inhibitor was secured for Splyce. H2k, they are struggling right now. Smittyj does still have the teleport and has now respawned, picking up the Phantom Dancer to try and help him in the 1 versus 1. But he's in a 1 versus 2 Pyra. Nisqy utilizing this ultimate to take on a very similar style to what Vitality did last week, where they would bring their mid laner into the split pushes lane to very quickly force a 2 versus 1, and then the enemy team just don't know what to do. So H2k, they're going to try and start the Baron.
Well, let's see what happens. We've seen this team lose after bad Barons and after losing bad Barons, but maybe this is the chance they have. They've got to be able to chunk it through. It's already down to half its health, but the rest of Splyce is coming. The cavalry has arrived. Can they finish it up, get that smite off? They can. Let's see if they survive this fight. Odoamne is already going to pick off 1, and Sheriff is out of there. Let's see how many members are going to last. H2k are dropping like flies here, I should say, as Promisq is going to get out alive, but the rest of his team is not so lucky. Caedrel running away, and that is an ace in the hole for a triple kill over to Splyce. 1 member standing for H2k, and I don't think that's going to be enough.
Splyce obliterate H2k at the Baron, and just as you say, Pyra, 1 bad Baron decision could very well cost them the game.
Well, it looked like they were on track to losing it no matter what, Vedius, but you are absolutely right. Now, Promisq is trying to keep this one alive, but with Odoamne on top of him, chunking him down, he doesn't care about that ignite. He's healthy enough. Nisqy already teleporting in, and the rest of Splyce are due to arrive any moment now. 8-0, only giving up 2 towers. Splyce completely dominating H2k on the day.
Very clean game from Splyce.
Can't take anything away from these guys. They came in with a game plan and they executed.
Exactly that, Pyra. I like their draft. You could see what they were going for. Nisqy again picking something unique up against the Zoe. He played the Veigar into a Azir before. Now bringing out the Twisted Fate, going 3-0-3. I feel like we got to see a lot of... We got to see answers to a lot of the questions that we had. Will Odo finally return to form? Definitely feels like he's back on track. Will Nisqy be able to hold his own? Well, he doesn't need to hold his own if he's making his way and having an impact on every other side lane.
Yeah, he was holding everyone at that point. I mean, this was just such an incredible show of performance, and you know, maybe you can question a little bit. H2k have obviously made a lot of changes. This is the team that's been struggling, but kudos to Splyce for just coming in and doing exactly what they plan to do. You give some credit to the coach, absolutely. You can give some credit to the players. And everyone kind of stepped up. We didn't see one person carrying. We didn't see Kobbe just popping off. I mean, yeah, Nisqy maybe, but everybody did their job and did it well.
And it's difficult for H2k because they were hoping that with the introduction of Selfie and moving Caedrel to the jungle, that maybe we would see some changes in their playstyle. Maybe we'd see some differences. However, we didn't really see anything, Pyra. We're still seeing the same issues. This team, their draft was a little bit weird. They didn't seem to be super proactive. We kind of expected Caedrel to set up Selfie for success, and while we did see him go for a gank up top, it didn't really result in anything. And it's difficult to say if this has really made a change in the positive direction for Splyce, because it feels like we're still seeing the same H2k rather. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And, you know, it is one game, right? And Splyce,
very true.
I would say Splyce probably performed beyond what we have seen in recent weeks. So they're also kind of on the up and up. And for H2k, they were searching for answers, and clearly they haven't found them yet.
So hopefully H2k will be able to find their form tomorrow. But for Splyce, definitely on the upswing.
Yeah.
They, every week so far, have gone 1-1. I'm sure they'd love to secure their first 2-0 week.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, we talked about it being a team game, but we want to hear from you guys. Don't forget to go at LL Esports on Twitter and give us your player of the game. Your options, of course, are Odoamne, Nisqy, and Kobbe, and I think those are all very good choices.
Yeah, I would be inclined to give it to Nisqy. I think it's just that Fate was very good, loved his use of the ultimates pretty much at every stage of the game. Felt like Splyce were much more proactive than what we've seen from them in the past, and I think a lot of that comes from their mid laner.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'll give you that one. I do think Odo, though, really stepped up big, especially compared to what we've been seeing. It's nice to see him doing that once again. Now, after the break, Laura's going to check in with kaSing for some more insight on Splyce's win before the top team in Europe, Vitality, look to continue their dominance against Rocket, so don't you go anywhere. Right back in before he goes Smittyj. Nisqy comes in to complete the gang squad. Instant first blood for the Splyce mid laner.
And secure themselves that town. Now, they found a
Oh man, Caedrel, he's gonna get chunked down, has to pop his on his hourglass, and he's gonna get taken out. The Cosmic Radiance comes a little too late as Kobbe picks up his first kill of the game. Splyce is coming, the cavalry has arrived. Can they finish it up, get that smite off? They can. Let's see if they survive this fight. Odoamne is already gonna pick off one, and Sheriff is out of there. Let's see how many members are gonna last. H2k are dropping like flies here, I should say, as Promisq the enough. Nisqy already teleporting in, and the rest of Splyce are due to arrive any moment now. 8-0, only giving up 2 towers. Splyce completely dominating H2k on the day.